All right, good morning, everybody. Happy snow day. I hope that you will take some time to enjoy the snow. Snow is ageless. There is no age requirement to make a snowball. Victor, I see you smiling. You've already been there this morning, I see. Okay, good. But certainly take the day to enjoy something traditional in a year that has been nothing but traditional. This morning, we talk about Hanukkah as we come to the end, so to speak, of the holiday. We have day 7 today, day 8 tomorrow. So I thought we'd spend a little bit of time talking about Hanukkah and connecting it, of course, to the two parashiot that it always overlaps with, those being parashiot Vayeshev and Miketz. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to share sources as always I do. All right, let's see if I can get these shared. Oops. Okay. All right. So we'll explore the sources together as we go. The Jewish calendar is really a life cycle of emotions. And those emotions are highlighted by each of the Hagim. And each holiday presents to us a certain set of questions that we have to ask as we celebrate the holiday. Rosh Hashanah is the holiday of acknowledgement. We acknowledge Borei Olam as the king of the universe. We acknowledge the fact that he has tasked us as his representatives with responsibilities that we have to do as we are his ambassadors out in the world. And we ask ourselves whether or not we've done a good job at that task on Rosh Hashanah. Did I do what I was supposed to do? If not, why not? How do I change? How do I make myself better so that the year ahead is better than the last year? Yom Kippur is a holiday of forgiveness. We ask ourselves the question, have I wronged anybody? Why did I wrong them? How did I wrong them? Can I fix what I broke? Or is it too late to mend broken relationships? Sukkot is a holiday of letting go. We leave the comfort of our homes. We sit outside in our sukkah. We let ourselves be subject to the elements. We leave the comfort of the physical structure of our home, and we ask ourselves whether or not we can live with the challenge of uncertainty, because I don't know what this year is going to bring, just as I don't know what the weather is going to be and if this shelter is going to protect me. Purim is the holiday of divine providence. Whether or not we see Borei Olam in the world, even if it's not readily apparent, and we ask ourselves, do we consider, do we think about, do we acknowledge Borei Olam in our lives every single day, even when things are difficult? Pesach is a holiday of nationhood and education. And we consider the fact that we are part of something that is much, much larger than we are, that goes back thousands of years. We're part of a nation. On Pesach, we ask ourselves whether or not we are doing what we are supposed to be doing to earn our part of that nation and educating our children to continue the values of that nation. Shavuot is a holiday of inspiration. We learn Torah. We celebrate the single greatest moment in the history of Judaism, and we ask ourselves whether or not we are being inspired by Torah and if we are inspiring others in that Torah. Each of the holidays brings an emotion. Each of the holidays brings a set of questions and challenges us to think deeply about who we are as people, our relationship with Borei Olam, and the next generation. What emotion, what concept, what idea is symbolized with Hanukkah, and what question do we ask ourselves on this holiday? And I think the answer to that lies in the parashiot that always overlap with the holiday. But before we get to the parasha, we need to take a larger view of Sefer Bereshit. Sefer Bereshit is a book about people. It's a book about raw emotions. If ever you wanted to know what it means to be a human being, you have to dig deep into Sefer Bereshit. It's a book about jealousy. It's a book about love. It's a book about hate. It's a book about family. It's a book about rivalry. All of the things that make us uniquely and starkly human are in Sefer Bereshit. It's the one book that focuses on what it means to be an individual human being. The rest of the 4 books of the Torah are about nationhood, the birth of the nation, and the development of that nation. Sefer Bereshit is about what it means to be a human being. And there's actually a code in Sefer Bereshit that tells you how to learn about, how to understand what it is that the individuals in Sefer Bereshit were committed to, particularly what they invested in their legacy becoming. And that code phrase is Ve'ele Toledot. These are the generations of this person, which you would think would then say, these are the generations of this person and list their children, but often that is not the case. It says Ve'ele Toledot, these are the generations of, and then it talks about something other than the person's children. That phrase is code for this is the legacy of that human being. This is what he has invested himself or herself in building as a human being. I want to look at some examples before we come to the parasha at hand. We begin with Esav.
What?
So cool frame by frame.
It says by Esav, Ve'ele Toledot Esav hu Edom, in source number 1. These are the generations of Esav. He was Edom. Esav lakach et nasha b'mirot Canaan. He took his wives from Canaan. Et Ada bat Elon Achiti, et Ahlibama bat Ana bat Zivon Achivi, et Basmat bat Mishmael achot neveot. He took several wives from Canaan, which is exactly what his father did not want. Ve'ele Toledot Esav hu Edom. He is Edom. Esav got the name Edom from the incident in Parashat Toledot where he sells the birthright to Yaakov for this soup called Adom. Haliteni namin Adom ha'adom hazeh. He comes back, he's starving, he's famished, he's ravenous, he wants to eat. He sells the right to the birthright for this dish of soup, ha'adom ha'adom hazeh. He's given the name Edom. Esav's legacy, what Esav lived for, was physical desire. Who Edom? He is Edom. His legacy is the red hot passion of desire, of lust, of physical gratification, of instant gratification. He is, in his essence, he is Edom. He is that bowl of red soup that was bought at the expense of all spiritual pursuits to satiate his physical desire at the moment, and that's who he is. His legacy is Edom. His legacy is a pursuit for accumulation of wealth. As we see in Parashat Vayishlach, he says to his brother, Yesh li rab, I have a lot. I'd like a lot more, but I have a lot. My life is about pursuing physical desires. That is his legacy. Noah has the same code word, Ele Toledot, and it says in the first pasuk of Parashat Noach, Ele Toledot Noach, Noach ish sadik tamim haya bedorotav et Elohim talech Noach. These are the generations of Noach. Noach is a Sadiq and he walks with God, and only then does it say that he had 3 children, Shem, Ham, and Yafet. This is the legacy, the generations of Noach. Noach is a Sadiq, relatively, not relatively, machloket and Rashi, conversation for another time. But the one fatal flaw about Noach is that he didn't see past himself. God came to Noach and said, Noach, the world is going to be destroyed. Build a teva so that you and your family will be rescued, saved from the flood. And the Mifashim tell us that it took him years, decades, to build the teva, with the goal being that in the process of building this teva, you should influence the society around you, tell them the world is going to be destroyed, and influence them to change. He doesn't do that. As Rashi says very clearly, Noach fails at influencing the people around him, but he saves himself. The flood happens, the world is destroyed, Noach gets off. God says, Noach, go procreate, create the future generations. He does not. He gets drunk in a tent. He has an incident with his sons. He does not procreate, and he becomes Isha Adama. We don't hear anything about Noach after that. Noach is a man who lives in the here and now. His legacy is himself. Ele Toledot Noach, Noach. This is the legacy of Noach, Noach. He is his own legacy. He lived in the here and now. He lived in the present. He didn't look for the future. He only lived in what he had to do, and he was a wonderful manager at that. But he did not have the peripheral vision to save the whole world, which is in stark contrast to Abraham. His legacy is himself, Ele Toledot Noach, Noach. It's those words right after the phrase, Ele Toledot, that tell you the legacy of that person. We see the same thing by Yitzchak. Ve'ele Toledot Yitzchak, ben Avraham, Avraham holidet Yitzchak. These are the generations of Yitzchak. Yitzchak was the son of Avraham. It doesn't tell us anything about his children. What was Yitzchak's legacy? His legacy was his father. As opposed to Noah, who lived in the present, Yitzchak lived in the past. He is the great binder between the initiator Abraham and the developer Yaakov, and he is the one who binds it together. He carries on and passes on and makes sure it stays complete, his father's values. But his legacy is his past. 9 out of 10 times when we talk about Yitzchak, we talk about Yitzchak in reference to Abraham. Akedah, talk about the greatness of Abraham, not just Yitzchak. We talk about the wells. His father also had wells. We talk about the incident that he had with Abimelech. Same thing that we had with Ham. Yitzchak's legacy is in actuality his past, his father, his commitment to what was behind him. Esav's legacy is a pursuit for physical desire. Noach's legacy is the here and now, is the present, is himself. Yitzchak's legacy is the past. Then we read about Yaakov in the beginning of last week's parasha, and things begin to change. Remember the code word Ele Toledot, and the word that follows that code phrase tells me what is the legacy, what is the investment, what is the defining feature of this human being. Says the pasuk in the opening of last week's parasha, Ele Toledot Yaakov, Yosef. ב-17 שנה היורא את אחיו בצאן והוא נער את בני בלהה ואת בני זלפה ושאביו ויבא יוסף את דיבתם רעה על אביהם. These are the generations. This is the legacy of Yaakov. His legacy is Yosef. His legacy is his children. His legacy is the future. For the first time, we see black on white somebody who is looking towards the future and understands that my legacy will be the people who I bring into the world and the values I give over to them. Yaakov's legacy, his investiture, his defining trait is his sons. And he brings 12 men into the world, each of whom is going to build a tribe that is going to develop into the Jewish people, which we will read about in Sefer Shemot. But before we get there, each of those individuals needs to be built up as an individual. And his focus is Yosef, for better or for worse. But his legacy is the future. Ele Toledot Yaakov Yosef. And we see that in the incident in last week's parasha that happens with Yosef. He's sold into slavery by his brothers. He ends up in the house of Potiphar. He's 17 years old in a foreign country, in a foreign culture, away from his parents. And as far as he's concerned, his father has written him off. Because you can't read the story and not ask yourself, why didn't Yosef, certainly once he becomes viceroy, try to communicate with his father? He's a man who has resources at his hand right now. Why doesn't he try to phone home? And the Mefarshim explained, because in his own mind, his father wrote him off. So he doesn't think there's anything to go back to. Different conversation. But he's in the house of Potiphar, in a foreign culture, in a foreign nation, in a foreign land. Says the pasuk, Vayhi k'hayom hazeh vayavo habayta. He goes to work. He shows up for work one day in the house of Potiphar. He's the butler. He's the agent of the home. He shows up to do work. And the house is empty. The only people in the home is Yosef and Eshet Potiphar, Potiphar's wife. And she grabs him and she seduces him and she wants to sleep with him. And he escapes and he runs away. Now, I'm sorry to ask this question, but if you're reading the text honestly, and we're talking about the emotions of human beings and how we operate, you can't not ask the question, forget how does Yosef not succumb, but why does he not succumb? He's 17 years old, he's 19 years old, he's in a foreign country, he's at the top of his game, he's handsome, he's famous, he's making his way up the ladder, a beautiful woman is throwing herself at him, he's got nothing to go back to, his parents will never know. Why does he not give in? He's a 19-year-old boy with a beautiful woman throwing herself at him. What is it that is able to keep Yosef from giving in, what gives him the fortitude to be able to not succumb to this almost impossible challenge in a home alone with this woman? The Gemara in Masechet Sotah answers that question, and in so doing, validates the pasuk that we started with in talking about the legacy of Yaakov. Says the Gemara in Masechet Sotah, "Vatitpesehu bibigdo." She grabbed him by his clothing, lemor, and she said, "Shichva imi, sleep with me." Be'ota sha'a bata diukno shel aviv v'nirata lo b'halon. Amar lo Yosef, "Atidin achecha shiichtevu al avnei efod, ve'ata benehem, nitzoncha shiimche shimcha mi benehem." He's about to fall on the bed, and behind the bed, Yosef sees the image of his father. And in that image that he sees, his father says to him, "Yosef, in the future, your brothers are going to have a stone, each of them, each tribe, each brother is going to have a stone on the breastplate that the Kohen is going to wear in the Bet HaMikdash. And as of this moment, you have a stone. Your name will be on the breastplate that the Kohen Gadol will wear in one of the holiest vestments, pieces of clothing in the Bet HaMikdash. Do you want your name to be erased? Because if you succumb at this moment, you give up the opportunity and the privilege of having your name be on that breastplate, on that ephod." And it's that thought, that image in his mind that allows him to not succumb. And that validates what we said above. It is the values and the morals and the education and the ideals and the concepts and the tradition that Yaakov passed on to Yosef that allowed him to overcome the challenges of life and to become Yosef HaSadik, the person that he was, because his father committed to a legacy of passing on those values to his children so that the future could continue to grow the Jewish people. And it challenges us with an incredibly difficult question. When your child is in that challenging moment, when his values are being compromised, he or she will inevitably ask him or herself a question. And that question will be, what would my father do? What would my mother do in this case? And make no mistake about it, even though you talk to them and they think you're not hearing it, it's there. And those principles will guide them in those moments. And the answer to that question will define where your children end up and in turn, what your legacy becomes. Yosef is asking himself here, what would my father do? What would my mother do? That's what the Gemara is telling me. And the answer was a resounding, my father would not give in. I can't betray the values and the morals that he gave me. So as difficult as this is, he runs away. That is the legacy of Yaakov, and that becomes the legacy of the Jewish people. And that is the holiday of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a holiday of legacy. The candles that are burning are symbolic of the candle of the Jewish neshama that is fighting to survive in a world whose darkness is impending, is trying to close in on the Jewish people, because the holiday of Hanukkah, the fight with the Yevanim, was not a fight for physical survival, it was a fight for spiritual survival. The Greeks were not trying to kill the Jewish people. They were trying to kill the Jewish persona. They had no problem with our physical existence. On Purim, they wanted to wipe us off the map. It's true. On Hanukkah, they had no problem with us living, as long as we were like them. They tried to take the Jew and the neshama out of the Jew. And we fought to hold on to that because we were fighting for thousands of years of legacy that had started at Matan Torah. And what we knew was our responsibility to pass on to thousands of people that would come after us. And that light is symbolic of that legacy. It's the torch that has been passed on from Moshe to Yoshua and so on and so forth to each one of us who have the responsibility of passing that torch on to the next generation. Lest we be the people under whose time that light becomes extinguished. That is the holiday of Hanukkah, and the question that it forces us to ask is, what will your legacy be? And I believe that that is intimated in the Gemara Masechet Shabbat that talks about the lighting of the candles, even though it's not the halacha l'maaseh. Perhaps because the question is too hard to ask. And the Gemara says, you all know it famously, Tanu Rabbanan, the Gemara brings a beraita, mitzvat Hanukkah ner ish ubeto. The basic mitzvah of lighting the Hanukkah candles is one candle each night. You light one candle, one on the first night, one on the second night, one on the third night. You have fulfilled your basic obligation of lighting the menorah, you're done. The next level up is that each member of the household lights a candle for themselves each night. So if there's 6 members in the household, on night 1 you light 6, on night 2 you light 6, on night 3 you light 6. One candle represents each individual. We don't follow either one of these two. Vehamehadrin, mina mehadrin, the ultimate, the best level of lighting the Hanukkah is, as we do, Bet Shammai omrim yom rishon madlik shemona mikan ve'elach pochet veholech, uBeit Hillel omrim yom rishon madlik achad mikan ve'elach mosif veholech. Machloket. Bet Hillel says we light 1 on the first night, 2 on the second night, 3 on the third night, 4 on the fourth night, and so on and so forth until we reach 8. And that's what we do. We hold like Bet Hillel, and the Gemara later on down here explains the logic for Bet Hillel because we go up in holiness and not down. And that's the accepted practice. But Bet Shammai has a very interesting logic, has a very interesting approach. He says we start with 8, and then 7, and then 6, and then 5, and then 4, and we end up with 1, we go backwards. That is not halacha l'maaseh. The Gemara here brings the logic of Bet Shammai because it's copying the way that the korbanot on Sukkot are brought also in descending fashion. But you have to ask yourself, why does Bet Shammai go backwards? It's almost like he wants the holiday to be over. Right? When we count down, it's because we want to get past what's behind us and get to what's ahead of us. I have 37 days left until winter vacation, and I'm going to count down 36, 35, 34, because I want to get through everything behind me, and I want to get to what I'm waiting for. So is Bet Shammai saying, I can't wait for the holiday to be over? I just want to get past this holiday? And I think the understanding of Bet Shammai is a very profound one. And Bet Shammai is saying the following. The days of Hanukkah are miraculous, and we celebrate them as they are, and we recognize the miracle that they are, and it's tremendous celebration. But at the same time, Hanukkah, it's not real. And don't understand me. When I say it's not real, living a life of miraculousness, it's not real. We don't live with outward miracles every single day. We don't see a jug of oil that's supposed to last 1 night, last 8 nights every single day. It's not real. What's real is what happens after it. Bet Shammai is saying, I'm celebrating the days of Hanukkah, but I am counting down until this non-reality, this life of miraculous living is over, because that's when the challenge of real life begins. What happens when the lights go out? Was I inspired? Did I learn something from it? Am I going to be able to move into the rest of the year and take the message of legacy, the message of the candle that fights to survive in a world of darkness with me? Am I going to carry the torch even when the candle is no longer lit, figuratively, and pass it on to the next generation? Is the next 300 days of the year going to be one in which I carry the miracle of Hanukkah with me and take the legacy that is symbolized by Hanukkah and have it permeate the mundane days? Because that is the challenge. And so we're going to count all 8 days, but we're going to count down to the reality that challenges me to ask myself the question of Hanukkah and whether or not I can answer it and be that torch. Because that is what Hanukkah is all about. And that is the challenge that we face as Jewish parents and Jewish educators and ambassadors of Borei Olam. And I end with one pasuk. The pasuk in Sefer Shemot. God promises the Jewish people that they're going to get Eretz Yisrael. And he says, "Ve'eveti etchem el haaretz," I'm going to bring you to the land. Asher nasati et yadi latet ota leAvraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. I'm going to give you the land that I promised Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. V'natati ota lachem morasha ani Hashem. I'm going to give it to you as an inheritance. I am Hashem. The Mefarshim ask, pasuk is not true. The people who left Egypt, to whom this was told, did not see the land. They did not get into the land. So how can God say, I'm going to give you the land and you will have it? And the answer that the Mefarshim give is that this pasuk needs to be used to define the meaning of the word morasha, which means inheritance, but it doesn't really mean inheritance. The word Yerusha means inheritance. And Yerusha, inheritance, means I get something because I was born in the right place at the right time. So my father had it, so I get it, and my son gets it, and so on and so forth. It's automatic. It's a Yerusha because I have the right last name. That is not morasha. Morasha means inheritance with a caveat. It means this item has been reserved for me, but I have to earn it. I have to do what is supposed to be done to be able to be privileged to be part of this inheritance with a caveat, which means God is telling the Jewish people, the land is there for you to have, for your children to have, but it has to be earned. And the only way it could be earned is if you, the people I am talking to now, pass the torch on to that generation, and they understand the privilege of Eretz Yisrael, and they understand that it comes with responsibilities, and they understand that it is a candle that is being passed to them, that they will need to fight to keep alive, lest the world around it extinguish it, and you live for eternity in darkness. Hanukkah is a holiday that celebrates legacy. It's the holiday of Yosef, the boy who lived the legacy of his son, of his father, the morals, the values, the ideals, the traditions that his father fought to pass on to him, and that he was able to implement in a world that was closing in on him. He had no other reason not to succumb except for the fact that his father ingrained in him these values. When we read Sefer Bereshit about human beings, when we read about the raw emotions of Yosef and his brothers, we turn to ourselves and to our children as we celebrate Hanukkah, and we ask ourselves the following question. When your light goes out, when the light of your life is extinguished, and there is no more candle burning in your name, what will people say about you? How will they remember you? What will be your legacy? And will your children be the people that you wanted them to be, to pass on the things that you stood for when your candle was burning? And when they are challenged in a world that is compromising, and they ask themselves, what would my father, what would my mother do in this moment? What do you want that answer to be? And will everything you did in your lifetime give them the courage to answer that question? Hanukkah Sameach and happy snow day.